Welcome to Culture Guard. I'm Ron Gray. With me is our co-host, Kari Simpson, and our special guest, Sue Hitchman.
Ron, it's an exciting day, and Sue, thank you for being here. I think you're the kind of guest that I like to have the most, and I should tell people that this is the first in what will be an ongoing series as the province of British Columbia and Alberta and Ontario and other lands across this great nation wake up to a new agenda that's there to take over your children's minds, their values, their ability to discern what's right and what's wrong, and ask them to live in a delusion.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're being embraced. Of course, we're talking about the SOGI, the newly branded political agenda of the LGBTQ++, and you're going to see a lot of rebranding going on. GSAs are no longer gay straight alliance, they're gender sexuality associations. SOGI is sexual orientation, gender identity, which gender identity is our current fad within the public education system.
And I think the real strength of the movement opposing this is coming from conscientious parents like Sue Hitchman. Sue, welcome here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank you. Just a little bit of brief background. The parents here in my own land of Langley in British Columbia are becoming informed about what is going on in their schools, due in large part to the admittance of the school district that sent out a letter asking everybody to celebrate and respect lifestyles that not everybody wants to celebrate and respect. And that, of course, was to do with the LGBT. But upon further investigation, parents have found out there's a lot more going on to this. Mm-hmm. So, Sue, tell us how you became involved in this. And I should tell you, following this show will be Sue's presentation that she did to the Langley School Board just this past Tuesday evening. Well worth your watch. It was researched, medical-based, common sense-based, and facts. And I think facts is probably the thing that seems to be missing in this discussion. So what happened at your school? How did you become involved in this?
Well, I heard of a letter that was sent out to the parents and guardians of the children on March 2nd. And in it was entitled Langley Celebrates Diversity. And that was an interesting title. And as I began to read through the letter, I began to see that there was this gender identity agenda that was going to be promoted in the school. And it was based on something called Policy 7200. And so I just looked into that to see what that was, something from the Ministry of Education. And there were some concerning things within that made me think, I need to research this a little bit and see where medical research is, where their stance is right now. And there seemed to be a disparity between what the school district was saying, what this letter was saying that we parents ought to be aware of, and then what current medical research was actually saying.
So if this is coming down from the Ministry of Education, this is not just of concern to Langley parents, this is the whole of British Columbia.
That's correct. Yes.
Well, and I should say that parents groups in Richmond were a little bit first out the gate with this. There's over 6,000 people rallying in Richmond. Mission has now come on board. And that was mostly, in large part, due to a letter that went home that informed grade 1 parents that their children would no longer be making Mother's Day gifts for them because they didn't want to risk offending a child who may not have a mother. I guess so much for biological facts in schools, but that at this point is just only one part of this. Now, you're not the only parent here in Langley because I've met a lot of you now. There have been meetings, there's people getting together, there's been presentations to the school board. I want to talk just a little bit about how you, because you're busy, you're a mom, you work, you've got all these things on the go, and now because of this agenda within the schools, you're taking your valuable time to ask questions. And do you think you're going to get answers about those questions?
Well, I hope I am. I made this presentation one evening this week, and I was assured that the chair and the superintendent of the Langley School Board would respond to my comments, and I truly believe they will. attend to them, and I hope I'll get a careful answer to that.
Now, I was at that meeting because I want to go and see. I've been involved in a number of school board meetings, and I have to give the Langley School Board, for the most part, great credit. The last school board meeting I was in was a very disappointing show of leadership from the board, but I didn't see that. You had a captive audience with the majority of the trustees and the staff at the local level.
Yes, I really feel I did. As I was speaking, I really sensed I was being attended to respectfully. People were showing great attention for the most part, and I felt like I was able to use my right of free speech in an appropriate way.
Now, there's going to become a challenge because this isn't a local school board, as Ron points out. This is a provincial mandated program now, these learning outcomes, although the outcomes are sort of ambiguous. You just have to do this, and we'll be dealing with those on later shows. But when you look at let's hypothetically say that the Langley Board, which I think for this community has always been very responsive, it values its parents and the consultation process. There was no consultation process in this one. No. And that may be in part because the Ministry of Education just mandated, this is what we're going to do. And Langley District, for whatever reason, was chosen as one of the pilot projects. Now, I think it would be wise for the Langley District to step back from that pilot project, because pilot project implies that this is a test run. And maybe this test ain't going so good here in Langley. And I believe presentations like yours, and I was just so impressed. I have to just say, when I see the quality of the presentations that were made, and another parent made it, the information, the respect that was shown, the language of science and facts, it's hard to argue with that. But our local board here is going to have a problem, because we could step back from it as a district, and I think we should, and I think that's the only thing that's going to probably be satisfactory to the majority of parents here in Langley once they hear what's going on, because there hasn't been anything in the news. But what do we do then for the Ministry of Education that says you have to do this? What are we going to do on a provincial front? Do we keep increasing our efforts and working towards bringing about something that is science-based?
Well, I would hope that would be the case. And, I think it really comes down to the concept of where the power is coming from as we speak of education. Is it coming from the top down, from the province down through the school board, down to parents and families and children? Or does it come from the families themselves? And that's what I think we need to be seeing, is that these parents have a right to voice their concerns about what involves their children.
Well, Sue and Kari, I think we ought to stress for the rest of the province, for the parents in the rest of the province, this is an example of how one or two or a few parents in your own school district, the place where you live, the place where your voice counts, with the courage to simply stand up and declare factually what you think to be true, can have an impact. And you can at least have an impact at the local level. And if in all of the school districts in the province, or even a majority of them, there are parents who will do this, things can change.
Well, things will change, Ron, because, we have civic elections coming up. You can always switch up your school board. You can switch up your provincial government. You can switch up your federal government. And I think that this issue probably is hitting hard right in the hearts of every parent, because we have lost that recognition that parents are the primary educators of their children, that it is parents that give over their authority on a part-time basis to teachers. The power should come from the parents, not the special interest groups that seem to be propelling these kinds of agendas, and they're dangerous agendas. Everybody gets that there's kids with issues. That's just nothing new from the beginning of time till the end of the time. That will be the problem. And the school system seems to be always trying to compensate for everything, when the greatest gift we can give all students is a good education, one that teaches them to be critical thinkers and independent thinkers based on fact. And I think that's the most tragic aspect to this whole nonsense that is taking over the schools. We are telling children to defy their logical thinking. We are telling students that you can believe in an identity that is not real, that you can just adopt whatever you want, how you feel that day, and it can change. Isn't that the greatest disservice that we're doing for kids at this point, that we're robbing them of the important value of critical thinking?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and as you have said, Kari, it's your voice, your vote, and your value.
Yeah.
That's where your strength lies as a parent, as a community.
Now, I just want to tell everybody, we are trying to build up the research on Culture Guard, so you have the tools to arm yourselves with this discussion, with this debate. Culture Guard is always open to helping any parent that is wanting to make a presentation, to find out more information. We're trying to build up our resources in this area so that you parents have access to the information that's going to help you be involved in the decision-making processes of your kids. Sue, on behalf of every parent in the province of British Columbia and across Canada, I really want to say thank you and how much I appreciate the time and effort. We're all busy. Everybody's busy. That's not an excuse anymore when our kids are involved. It's not an option. You have to be involved and you have to be informed people. You find out what's going on in your schools. I can tell you that there's a lot of programs that your children are being introduced to and taught that you would not agree with if you knew what was truly going on. So much of it sounds so good, but you need to go in and spend time and find out what's really happening, how it comes in.
Audience, be prepared to take notes during Sue Hitchman's presentation. This is going to be important.
They've got instant replay. The joys of technology. Thank you, everybody, for this time. Please check in often. We're going to be featuring different parents that are doing different things across the province. And it's great. People are rallying. There is a movement afoot. Something really good is coming out of this. And one of those galvanizing factors are parents like Sue. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sue.
All right. The video is coming right up of Sue's presentation. Have a great one.
My name is Susan Hitchman, and this is the presentation I made to the Langley School Board earlier this week. It's entitled, Have We Done Our Homework? Redressing Langley's New Mandate on SOGI in the Classroom. The Province of British Columbia and the Ministry of Education have taken major steps to recognize and protect the rights of LGBTQ+ individuals, announces a recent March 2nd letter to parents and guardians of Langley students from Acting Superintendent of Schools Gord Stewart. The letter is entitled, Langley Celebrates Diversity. Gender identity, explains the directive, must be included in all public and independent school district codes of conduct throughout the province. Today's presentation is intended to explore the difficulties with this directive and encourage a critical look at the mandate of celebrating gender diversity in Langley schools. While the underlying philosophy of supporting what are now termed SOGI, sexual orientation, gender identity, students, may be intended to benefit each student's overall well-being, it is essential we as a community understand the problem, the definitions, and the solutions suggested by the Langley Celebrates Diversity strategy, and compare them to the most up-to-date research available on the subject. Langley School's strategic plan involves core values of integrity, critical thinking, and collaboration. Here's a chance to put that plan to work. As we take a brief but critical look at this SOGI ideology, I will be referencing results collated in a special report on sexuality and gender by Lawrence Meyer and Paul McHugh, published in the New Atlantis, fall 2016. The report is a summary of many of the most rigorous findings produced by the biological, psychological, and social sciences related to sexual orientation and gender identity. Notes attached to this report contain 370 references to other studies and publications. In addition, I will be referencing the American College of Pediatricians position statement, updated January 2017, entitled Gender Ideology Harms Children. The first problem with the Langley approach is that it assumes we know what sexual orientation and gender expression means, since it prohibits discrimination against them. But we need a definition of SOGI. Meyer and McHugh make it very clear that the concept of soji is not well defined, and there is little scientific evidence that it is an innate, fixed biological property. For instance, according to the authors, the born that way hypothesis is not supported by science. How do we know then who we are and are not discriminating against? What do we know about sexual orientation or gender identity? According to the American College of Pediatricians position statement, quote, "No one is born with a gender. Everyone is born with a biological sex. Gender, an awareness of oneself as male or female, is a sociological and psychological concept, not an objective biological one. A person's belief that he or she is something they are not is, at best, a sign of confused thinking." End of quote. And according to Meyer and McHugh, the majority of children who identify as the gender opposite their biological sex will not continue to do so as adults. In reviewing the scientific literature, they go on to explain, we find that almost nothing is well understood when we seek biological explanations for gender dysphoria. If sexual orientation and gender identity is naturally in flux throughout childhood and adolescence, and generally settles to represent biological sex, whose good are we promoting when we support SOGI policies? Langley's Policy 7200 on student anti-harassment ignores this scientific evidence and instead employs a heavy-handed use of dysphemisms such as homophobic, transphobic, and heterosexist behaviors, and English teachers know what words like that are meant to accomplish. I suggest that supporting Policy 7200 sets the stage for an environment in which detrimental and unnecessary gender dysphoria and sexual disorientation is supported and may even be created. Facts are stubborn things, observed Mark Twain, but statistics are pliable. Mark Twain reminds us that we must be careful interpreting statistics that are intended to sway us toward a certain perspective, even if those statistics come from well-known sources. The Langley letter tells us that between 10 and 20% of the population identify as not strictly heterosexual, whereas Stats Canada 2014 records the number of people identifying as homosexual or bisexual as 3%. Now, you may have noticed that even this much smaller statistic may not show statistical validity. That is, whether it measures what it is supposed to measure. Do these numbers include children, for instance, for whom we've already learned that gender is often marked with fluidity until adulthood is reached? And what about the term identify? Does that refer to transient feelings of attraction or to established behaviors? What about the statistical reliability of self-identification? Is it reproducible with the same results every time? The point is, if the statistics included in the Langley Celebrates Diversity letter are skewed, might not the whole basis of the proposed sex ed curriculum be equally skewed or distorted? Would you agree that the mandate of our school system is to support students in their education, to give them every reasonable education-affecting advantage, and to remove as many education-affecting disadvantages as possible? Then we must ask whether the SOGI celebrating sex education curriculum, the result of an unprecedented agreement granting two individuals, the Corans, power to create and enforce our province's sex ed curriculum, is advantageous or disadvantageous to our students. I would like to suggest that Policy 7200 and the new sex ed curriculum has not been based on reliable scientific evidence. Meyer and McHugh conclude, in reviewing the scientific literature, we find that almost nothing is well understood when we seek biological explanations for what causes some individuals to state that their gender does not match their biological sex. The findings that do exist often have sample selection problems, and they lack longitudinal perspective and explanatory power. Therefore, it is nothing more than political rhetoric controlled by a powerful, small interest group that is swinging the pendulum to an extreme social position, perhaps equally damaging to students in particular and society in general, as its polar opposite, discrimination. The Langley letter indicates that the school district has adopted an extreme end of the pendulum plan to support certain students, implying that these supports are advantageous to all students. Several things surprise me about these recommendations and actions. Firstly, no mention is made of conformity to current research, such as the American College of Pediatricians data, which says, the college maintains it is abusive to promote this ideology, first and foremost for the well-being of the gender dysphoric children themselves, and secondly for all of their non-gender discordant peers, many of whom will subsequently question their own gender identity and face violations of their right to bodily privacy and safety. Secondly, Langley has made no mention of providing counseling for SOGI students. The summary by Meyer and McHugh clearly identifies members of the non-heterosexual population as being at an elevated risk for a variety of adverse mental health outcomes, and that there is little evidence that social stressors such as discrimination and stigma contribute to this elevated risk. Anxiety disorders, depression, substance abuse, and suicide are significantly greater in non-heterosexuals than in heterosexuals, even in Sweden, which is among the most SOGI-affirming countries. Discrimination is not the cause of SOGI distress. Therefore, celebration cannot remedy it. In conclusion, I would like to suggest that enforcing a pro-SOGI sex education curriculum is harmful to our children and has not been thoroughly and objectively examined. Rather, the curriculum ought to be informed by the most current, valid, and reliable peer-reviewed research. I and other concerned parents here tonight have come to ask that you show prudence by putting a hold on implementing this sex ed curriculum until it has been more thoroughly assessed. Explore the research, involve health professionals, include public discussion. Let's do our homework. Thank you for listening.